So here's our final video of the unit. This is about Napoleon in about 8 minutes. Not enough time really for Napoleon, but I guess it's better than nothing. Your left side today is to make a timeline with about 10 events that should be in chronological order of his life, and there's definitely more than 10 events we'll be talking about, so this should not be a problem. So when we learn about Napoleon here, keep in mind this is right after the French Revolution. And we learned a lot about that and how tens of thousands of people literally died in the process of trying to make France a republic and to get rid of the monarchy. And it takes a odd twist when after that happens, they actually become under a military dictator and not exactly a republic at all for quite a while. So after the revolution, in 1795, some royalist rebels who were loyal to the king, even though he was now deceased, marched to the National Convention. Now, Napoleon at this point was already a military officer, and he asked to defend the delegates there, the ones that were still there. Many of the delegates fled, and this won the respect of many of those delegates, and on a broader scale, he became a national hero. He was already in the French military and was in France since about the age of 10, even though he was originally from Corsica, but Corsica was turned over to France by the Republic of Genoa, which is why he was considered French, even though his parents were actually of Italian noble ancestry from like the Tuscany region of Italy. So a little sidebar there for you on Napoleon. And actually, because he was from Corsica, he always spoke with this heavy Corsican accent. It didn't really sound French per se. He couldn't even actually spell French correctly for most of his life. So some little interesting stories there about Napoleon. So anyway, Napoleon becomes a national hero, and he takes advantage of this situation. Okay, because there's like this power vacuum in France. Now, there's chaos. This revolution did not occur smoothly, as we say very rarely revolutions do. So what does he do? Well, first, the Directory appoints Napoleon to lead an army against Austria and Sardinia. Remember, Austria was an enemy of France, right? We learned about that with Marie Antoinette, and he did very well there. Now, he also went and fought some battles in Egypt against the British, and there he did not go as well as the other battles, but that was sort of kept pretty quiet. So when he did return, he was, still considered a hero. And by 1799, the people did not really support the Directory in France. They didn't like how the Directory was running the show. So Napoleon seized this opportunity and surrounded it, and he took control. Now, when Napoleon was in the council, France was still at war. But eventually, he signed peace treaties. And when France was at peace, he took advantage of this to make some domestic reforms. Things like setting up public schools, which were called lycées. He returned the Catholic Church to France, which was really out ever since the Revolution. He also created the Napoleonic Code, which was supposed to protect some rights of the people that were established under the Revolution, but it set back rights for women. Mary Wollstonecraft and Olympia de Gouges would not have been happy. He also then became emperor, and most of the people of France supported this. But he did something symbolic. When the Pope was there to crown him emperor, Napoleon took the crown from the Pope and put it on his crown himself, sort of showing, hey, I'm even more powerful than you. A little crazy moment there. Now, as he was emperor, he wanted to control more of Europe. Think of like an Alexander the Great type of quality there. And he also wanted to increase control of the Americas. However, we learned about the Haitian Revolution in Saint Domingue, and he eventually sold Louisiana to President Jefferson at the time in the United States. I don't know what I was writing there up top, so anyway. He annexed the Austrian Netherlands and parts of Italy, and he was doing well, crushing his opponents. So when they are suffering at his hands, many of these countries signed peace treaties. Here's an example after the Battle of Austerlitz. His one big loss at this point was the Battle of Trafalgar, which was against the British because, as Napoleon learned at this point in time, no one can really defeat the British Navy. So after the loss of the Battle of Trafalgar, Napoleon said, all right, I'm going to give up on Britain, and I'm going to stick with continental Europe. And the British Navy remained supreme. but he still wanted to sort of get back at Britain a little bit, so he created this continental system where he forbade countries on the continent of Europe from trading with Britain. And remember, Britain is an important factor in trade economy at this time. He then fights the Peninsular War. Peninsular, think of Spain and Portugal being on the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, so many French forces lost their lives here, about 300,000 men. So this is, one of the first big changes for Napoleon. He then decides, you know what, I'm going to invade Russia. Alexander was still selling grain to Britain. There was a dispute over Poland. But what happened is as he invaded Russia, the Russians retreated, but then practiced scorched earth policy, which means there was no food or things for the Napoleon's forces to use. And many of them starved or just didn't have resources, and many of them died and had to return to France. So here's some images of this invasion. And this really leads to Napoleon's downfall. He tries to put another army together, but the French army fell in the German state at the Battle of Leipzig. And by 1814, the Allies were in Paris. Yes, Paris is a capital now. His generals refused to fight on. This is crazy. We have our enemies on our capital. What are we still fighting here for? So by April of 1814, Napoleon realizes he has to, unfortunately, sign a surrender, which you see here in this image. So what happens next? When they get rid of Napoleon, they have what's known as the Bourbon Restoration. The people want to return to the king, to the monarchy, but remember, pretty much all of King Louis's family was dead now. So the only person left was one of his brothers. The peasants were not a big fan of this. It doesn't go so well after a few months, and Napoleon says, hey, this is time for me to return. And people are happy at first, but then he decides to fight the British, because when Europeans countries see Napoleon come back, they're like, ooh, a little bit worried here. But anyway, it led to his downfall, and he lost, and he's completely out of power now and remains an island on the rest of his life. Okay, so we'll see you next class. Don't forget that password is